Good morning. We're talking about a hotly debated topic this morning. We're talking about protein supplements, protein drinks, protein bars, meal replacement shakes, and if they should be part of your nutrition and the way you eat. So I'm glad you're here this morning. My name is Tanessa Shears. I'm a weight loss coach for women. I've been working with women, both personal training and nutrition, for over 10 years to help them lose weight and feel confident again. That is what I'm here to do, to take the science and the advice and everything and distill it down into what works and give you actionable, implementable steps. So we're talking about whey protein today. So if you rewind back 8 to 10 years ago, sorry, I can't stop laughing. I'm trying to do this broadcast right now and my boyfriend is in the shower singing and it's really loud and I can hear him, but it's awesome. But besides that, if you'd have rewinded back, 6-8 years ago, I was a huge fan of whey protein supplements, and I used to have, 1 to 2 shakes a day, but this was always based on old information and old knowledge I had about what was good for your body and nutritionally what my body needed. I mean, having done the bodybuilding thing where, I competed in the fitness shows, the model was always, high protein, lots of growth, build your muscles, protein shakes are good for you, and this has completely changed in the last, couple years about the way I think about this. So what I want to do today is actually present with you the facts on what whey protein is and how it works, and then let you decide if it's something that you want to keep incorporating. And this goes the same with protein bars because they're often made the same way. So a couple of years back when I decided to start cutting out whey protein, I did it because of just reading the ingredient list. That was the first thing. And I'm going to go into 2 main points today about why I personally don't use whey protein powder anymore. But I'm just going to read to you on here the ingredients on my whey protein blend. And this is something that I had, taken religiously for years and years. And this particular bucket, I think, expired over 1.5 years ago. So I'm keeping it here so that I can always refer back to it so I can guide clients through their questions. So if we're looking at the ingredients on a whey protein blend, you ask yourself, when's the last time you've looked at your ingredient list? Or if you looked at the ingredients on, the bars that you're eating. So I look at this and, if you didn't know this, the order that the ingredients are listed is the order that they are in weight. So if in here it says that the protein blend is first, that means by weight it is the highest amount in this container. So we obviously know that there's a protein blend in here, but then we start to look at the rest of the ingredients. And it is here, it says, after your whey protein blend, we have cocoa powder, xanthan gum, soy lecithin, which is an emulsifier, sodium chloride, and then sucralose. So if we're looking at all these things on here, and if we are, moving towards an unprocessed, unrefined diet full of high foods, which realistically means if you look at a food, you know where it came from, meaning you look at a piece of broccoli, you know it's a plant. You look at a chicken breast and you know it came from an animal. But the further things are away from their natural source, the more I start to question about what they had to go through to get there. And when we start looking at these ingredients, I mean, yes, some of them are natural, but at the end of the day, is this really how I want to be consuming my protein? So that was the reason that I removed them a couple years ago, was that really these are just sugar. And I decided to start getting my protein through food sources. And that may seem quite intuitive to you and you're like, yep, I totally understand that. But what I have been discovering recently by reading the research has actually made me so thankful that I gave up my whey protein a while ago. And I want to read you some of the stuff that I have been figuring out about whey protein. So what whey protein is when you are making cheese and you separate out, essentially what whey protein is, it is the byproduct left over from making cheese, if that makes sense. So you have the curds and you have the cheese. So it's the leftover of that. And usually when you think of a dairy protein, it has 2 different forms of protein in it. A whey protein, which is usually about 20% of most animal products. So if you're thinking things like cheese and dairy and eggs. And then the other portion of it is called casein. So there are 2 different types of protein. So last time I checked, most of the protein powders you will be consuming, unless you're vegetarian, vegan, or choosing a vegetarian or vegan option, are whey-based protein. So here's what we think. We like to think, I'm having protein, which is great, because if we have been, chatting on these live broadcasts over the last couple months, we know that weight gain is simply a hormonal dysregulation of your fat mass. I'm going to say that again. Weight gain or having extra body fat on your body right now is a disruption in the hormones that control what happens to your fat processing. So now that we know that, and if you haven't heard about this yet, I highly encourage you to go look through some of the other videos I've made, especially the ones where I talk about insulin and its blocking of fat burning whenever it is present in the body. So we know that when the hormone insulin is in higher levels in the body, you cannot access stored body fat, therefore you cannot burn fat. So traditionally, and if we're just looking at a base level, what we know is that when blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up. We know that, we've talked about that before. So we think that, well, protein must be fantastic because it has no carbohydrates in it. So if it has no carbohydrates, blood sugar can't go up, insulin can't go up. That is the traditional thinking, but I hate to tell you that that is incorrect. Incorrect. Proteins can make your insulin go up too, and especially when they're in too high amounts, and particularly when you are consuming whey protein. Whey protein is responsible for a pretty massive insulin spike, and I've got some numbers down here. So essentially what happens when food enters the stomach, okay? There is a class of hormones that is released, and this is any food. I want to tell you, it is carbohydrates, it is proteins, and to a minimal extent is fats. So when they enter the stomach, there are these hormone class called incretins. And the specific two, they're called GLP-1 and GIP. That's all you need to know. They have big long words attached to them, but those two get released. They have two functions. Those incretin hormones slow down movement through the intestines, and which is a good thing because it slows that ramp up in blood sugar. But the other thing it does, and this is specifically GLP-1, is it causes a boost in insulin regardless of the food you are eating. We know that if we want to keep insulin low so that we can burn body fat, we need to keep it low. And if when food enters the stomach and GLP-1, that's that hormone, go up, we're essentially knocking ourselves out of fat burning mode. But here is what floored me. Whey protein in particular increases that hormone that bumps insulin, that takes us out of fat burning mode by 298%. I read this and I was like, oh my gosh. And then if you think about it, who are the populations that use whey protein? Bodybuilders. What do bodybuilders want to do? They want to build, they want to store, they want to grow. If you are trying to lose body fat, you do not want to be storing. And whey protein in particular stimulates insulin to go up, which blocks you from being able to access the fat that you have stored. That is significant. So then we have to ask ourselves, well, is there another way I can get my protein? And that's when you have to start looking at more natural sources. And I do want to point out that the vegetarian and vegan sources of protein had very minimal effect on insulin. So those are things that come from plants. So specifically, I know Pea Protein is a brand that we've been talking about over in our Facebook group, She Takes Action. But vegetable proteins raise insulin very minimal. But if we're talking about thinking that we're taking a whey protein supplement, it's bumping up insulin and not allowing us to access stored fat. And that's important. That's important if it's blocking us from getting to our goals. So what do we do instead? We know that if we take in too much protein or whey protein, insulin is going to go up, then we need to find a way to bring it back down. So what we're often told is that you need to have a high protein diet to help maintain muscle mass. Well, that's actually incorrect, because if you actually are taking in too much protein, the body doesn't have a place to store extra protein. If you take in too many carbohydrates, it stores it as fat. If you take in too much fat, it stores it in fat. If you take in too much protein, there's not like a protein reserve where you just, pack on some extra muscle because you have extra protein. What happens is a process called gluconeogenesis. Gluco meaning glucose or blood sugar, neo meaning new, and genesis meaning to be created. So creating new blood sugar. So if you take in too much protein, what happens is anything left over that's not used for cell maintenance, muscle repair, or any of the other functions that's involved with protein metabolism, your body converts it to glucose, to blood sugar. And not only does that, again, bump up insulin, but it stores it as fat. What are you going to do with all that extra blood sugar? So we want to look at having a diet that consists of protein sources that are natural, so meats and dairies, and the other ones you find them in are like lentils and beans and stuff like that, and not in excessive quantities. We don't need to be getting 30, 35, 40 grams of protein per meal. And this is completely counterintuitive to what we have been taught. But when you start to look beyond that narrow model of calories in, calories out, and thinking about muscle repair, when you actually look at the science of what your hormones are doing when you're ingesting these foods, it lets you make educated decisions. So since those days when I used to do the whey protein shakes and the bodybuilding, and I used to get like 150 grams of protein a day, since dialing that back, there has been no change in muscle mass, meaning I haven't lost muscle mass during that time. I have, however, lost body fat, which I found actually super interesting, and it was completely counterintuitive to everything I'd been taught in university. So what we need to understand is that we need to take these matters into our own hands and figure out what's actually going on. So on top of that, the other thing that I wanted to point out about why these whey protein supplements might not be your best friend is because we look on the back here and we're like, oh my gosh, 1 gram of sugar, how amazing is that? Blood sugar spikes insulin, we're good. Actually, if we look at our ingredient list that we read earlier, sucralose is a type of non-nutritive sweetener. And I'm only going to get into these briefly today, but a non-nutritive sweetener is essentially a sweetener that carries no calories with it. So you have sucralose, aspartame, saccharin, you have stevia, there's all kinds like that. So we think, great, no calories, and you know what? It's interesting because it actually has no effect on blood sugar either. So we think sweeteners are great. But studies after study are shown that these particular sweeteners that have no nutrition, no calories, non-nutritive sweeteners have an effect on the insulin pathway, and they do promote an increase in insulin. So if we combine whey protein, which spikes up GLP-1, which spikes up insulin, and we combine sweeteners, which spikes up insulin, and then let's be real, when is the last time you had a protein powder with water? No, you have it with fruit. You have it with lots of berries. You have it maybe with a couple scoops of peanut butter that are loaded with sugar. So you're essentially saying, hey, we don't want to take fat out of storage. Let's leave it there. And on top of that, look at all of this sugar. Let's store it in there too. So I want you to look right now. If you are one of those morning smoothie people or you are a protein powder person, I want you to ask yourself, am I making myself a sugar bomb first thing in the morning? First thing in the morning. So these are all great things I want you to consider. I mean, if you love whey protein and it's the only way you can get your protein in because you are on a busy lifestyle, that makes sense. But what our job is to be informed about what we are eating so we can make decisions on what works best for us. This goes for meal replacement shakes, supplements, bars. Read the ingredient list. See what is really on there. And then on top of that, look what you're consuming these foods with. Are you consuming them with a boatload of fruit and sugary peanut butter? And then are you sweetening them with stevia? These are all things we need to take into consideration to decide if foods are right for us. And feeling, do I feel bloated after? Am I going towards my goals? If you're not losing body fat and that's your goal, it's time to change things up. It's time to try removing one thing and seeing how your progress goes for 2 weeks. And maybe that thing this week for you is trying to remove your supplements and seeing what happens. If you don't see a change, add them back in. That's the great thing, is there's no one strategy that works for everyone. So I would like you to leave me a comment before you head out of here today. Let me know, are you a protein supplement user? Have you learned something new today? And if this content is important or relevant to you, I'd love for you to hit like so that we can reach people just like you who are interested in actually knowing what's going on in their body and not just believing all the propaganda and protein and supplement companies selling their products to you, but understanding what works for our body on the inside. And you guys know I always have my Body Smart program at TanessaShears.com/BodySmart, where I work with women one-on-one for 12 weeks to help them get their strategy in place, to help them feel confident, look amazing, and lose that weight that they've been battling to lose for so long. If that sounds like you, head over there. But otherwise, you guys leave your questions in the comments below. I'd like to even get a good discussion going on this about why you think whey protein is good, why you think it might not be good. I'm always open to a discussion to answer your questions. You guys, I will see you later this week. Have a beautiful day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.